Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. This is Reverend Evan Coleman, and I come to you live every single Sunday morning with Metaphysics with Reverend Evan Coleman. And for the last 20 weeks or so, we have been in an overview of the Old Testament. An overview of the Old Testament, trying to parse out the narrative, the historical narrative. We're looking at the Bible from the perspective of history, but we have a thorough understanding that the Bible is not a reliable history textbook. It is not history the way you and I think of history. Rather, it uses myth, legend, fable. It uses a variety of literary devices to tell the story of a people's relationship with a God. A people's relationship with a God. I draw heavily from Carl Jung. I draw heavily from Joseph Campbell, The Power of Myth, the hero with 1,000 faces. I draw heavily from Charles Fillmore Metaphysical Bible Dictionary to interpret these metaphors, these myths, legends, fables, into something that is meaning and relevant for us today. And that's what is important. This is not just about what happened 4,000 years ago. This is about what's going on right here, right now. These various characters, people, places, events in the Old Testament have a metaphorical meaning to our lives today. This is, it's very, very easy for me to say, well, this is what the Bible means. Well, what does it mean to you? What does it mean to you? And you can get a better handle on what does it mean to me if you understand the history involved and if you have some grasp into the metaphysical interpretation of things. But all of these characters are parts of you. They are thought beings within you. We have gone through the book of Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, Leviticus, Deuteronomy. We've covered the Pentateuch, the first 5 scrolls, the Tanakh, the core of what is also called the law or the Torah. It is the heart and soul of the First Testament, the Old Testament. So we've covered the Pentateuch, and now we are moving out of that core into the book of Judges. We just touched briefly on the book of Judges last week. Important concepts for the period of time with Judges. Remember, we are dealing with a cultural clash. We are dealing with a nomadic people, herdsmen, tribesmen. We are dealing with the transition of those herdsmen and tribesmen, those nomadic people, into being a settled community, into being farmers, into being agriculturalists, into living in cities. So it is a cultural transformation. And Joshua and the Judges, they bump right up against another significant period in history, and that is Joshua comes into the picture, and the Judges come into the picture right about the period where we would expect to find the Bronze Age and the Iron Age coming together. And that's important because nomadic people do not smelt ore into metals, and settled people do. And so as the nomadic people, as the Israelites, the herdsmen, tribesmen, that the Israelites, as they begin to be settled as well, they come up against other gods. They come up against gods of fertility, the Baals, the Baal and Baaleth, or the Ashtoreth, and they encounter these other cultures with other gods, and there is a cultural conflict that goes on. The writer, in the Bible, the writer kind of picks up on this cultural conflict and is very definitely in favor of a one God concept. And all of these other gods, I'm sorry, no, our God is the only God. And instead of being the head of a pantheon or anything like that, our God is a God of everything. Our God is a God of agriculture and herdsmen and farmers and shepherds. Our God is the God of the mountain, the God of the river, the God of the tree, the God of the this, the God of the that. If it has to do with the universe, then it's our God. That is the Deuteronomist's point of view. So if something happens, then God intended it to happen. That is, and if you can deal with God, if you can deal with Yahweh, then everything's going to work out for you. Read Deuteronomy 28. If you can deal with God, then everything's going to work out for you. Great. And if you can't deal with God, then, I'm sorry, and it's not God that's doing it to you, you're doing it to yourself. So we're running into these cultural conflicts. We're running into, and that is the entire story of the book of Judges, to a certain extent the book of Joshua. But when we get into Judges, what we see are these different judges having a problem with other local tribes. Sometimes it's the Philistines, sometimes it's another tribe. But we run into these cultural conflicts with these other people who are living in the land. And what happens is that there is no one leader in the land. Israel does not exist as a nation. We are still in a loose confederation of tribes. And we come to one another's mutual aid from time to time, but in general we are independent agents, and I am responsible for my tribe, but not necessarily the larger community of Israel, because Israel does not exist yet. We have the Israelites. They are a people, but we do not have a nation state, and we do not have a king yet. That becomes very, very important. There is no king in Israel. There is no one central authority, one central government doing everything. We are still this loose confederation, this alliance of tribes. So with that, then, we're going to pick up. We covered Barak and Deborah and Barak. We covered that a little bit last week. We're only going to cover 3 of the 12 judges that are mentioned in any kind of detail. But Deborah is an important judge. Her story is one of the. How can you tell which judge is an important judge? Well, is their story long or short? Is the story good? Is the story worthy of song? So Deborah, and we covered a portion of this last week. Deborah was an Israelite, and she was a prophetess. She was a soothsayer, if you will. She was someone who spoke for God. Was a prophetess. She was called to be a judge. A judge, again, is a tribal leader that just feels when they feel the call. They say yes, they answer the call with a yes, and they are given an assignment, go out and deal with such and such a tribe that's giving us trouble. So at this moment, the Israelites are having problems with this King Jabin of Canaan. So this is a Canaanite tribe that we are having a problem with. And what happens is that Deborah is called to be a judge, and then she summons Barak to be her military advisor or military commander. They fought the Canaanite commander Sisera. After the Israelites won, Sisera fled to the tent of the wife of Heber, so there was a little, something going on there. And when he fell asleep, Jael drove a tent peg into his temple. Ooh, kind of a gruesome end for Sisera. And then then the Song of Solomon, and this becomes important. Let me see if I can bring this up for you. Yeah, here we go. This is just a nice little poetic section, and you find this in the Bible from time to time. This is in Judges 5. When locks are long in Israel, when the people offer themselves willingly, bless the Lord. Hear, O kings, give ear. O princes, to the Lord I will sing. I will make my melody to the Lord, the God of Israel. Remember, whenever you see that word Lord with all upper caps, capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D, whenever you hear that use, the Lord, they're specifically invoking the name Yahweh. So hear, O kings, O princes, give ear. O Lord, when you went out from Seir, when you marched from the region of Edom, the earth trembled and the heavens poured. The songs indeed poured water. And it's just this lovely little poetic section. I'm not going to do the whole thing. But this is what's known as the Song of Deborah. The king came, they fought, and in that poetic section, you see this here. They fought the kings of Canaan at Tanakh by the waters of Megiddo. By the waters of Megiddo. I'm going to bring this out. Why is Megiddo so important? Why is the place of this battle? That's what's being described here. They are describing, in the Song of Deborah, they are describing this battle between the armies of Deborah and Barak for the Israelites and Sisera for the Canaanites. So there's this battle that's going on, and it is being fought by the waters or in the plains of Megiddo. Right? Megiddo is a real place. You can go there today. Megiddo was a walled city, and it has been excavated by archaeologists today. Megiddo is mentioned just a few times, a handful of times in the Old Testament. But if you go to the New Testament, in Revelations 16:16, this is the site where the final battle is given. Here, the battle with Barak and Sisera, this was fought on the plains of Megiddo, by the waters of Megiddo. When you read the account in Revelation 16:16, the final battle, the place of the final battle is given as Harmageddon or Armageddon. Armageddon or Harmageddon. The Har is the high place, so it is the high place of Megiddo. When the battle that is described in Revelation 16:16, where the site of that final battle is given, it is fought in the high places of Megiddo. Why is it important? Armageddon doesn't just mean the end of the world. It's a place. It is an actual place, the high place of Megiddo. And the writer of Revelations, attributed to John, John the Revelators, because there's a whole bunch of Johns, but John the Revelator, sometimes John the Elder, it might be, but there were a whole bunch of Johns. Sometimes it's difficult to tell the Johns apart. So the writer of Revelations brings this symbolic battle at the end of time, at the end of that period. He brings that final battle between the forces of good and the forces of evil. He brings that to a known place, some place that the readers would identify, would know what he was talking about. And so he brings that battle to the site of these other famous battles in Jewish history. In addition to this battle here in Judges with Deborah and Sisera, in addition to this, there's another place where Pharaoh Necho, and I'd have to look up the reference, Pharaoh Necho of Egypt comes and fights on the plains of Megiddo. So again, Revelation is just bringing the site up to date, if you will. So yeah, this is a real place. It's an archaeological site. You could go there today. I think they're still giving tours there. It's on my bucket list. Okay, so and that's pretty much the story of Barak and Deborah and Sisera. Moving on from this, I'm going to touch on another one of the major judges, and that is Gideon. And let's see. Okay, we're in good shape. I'm just checking out the technology, people. So again, the Israelites did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. This is a common theme throughout the entire book of Judges. Why are we having problems? It's usually because we worshiped after other gods. It's usually because we turned away from Yahweh worship and we started worshiping the Baals. We started worshiping the Ashtoreths. You know, that is the Deuteronomist's interpretation. That is why we have troubles. Again, the Israelites did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord gave them into the hands of Midian for 7 years. So Midian is a foreign tribe, the Midianites. For whenever the Israelites put in seed, the Midianites and the Amalekites, and we've had troubles with that tribe in the past, the Midianites and the Amalekites and the people of the east would come up against them. So God called Midian to be a judge. Again, he called him to be a tribal leader. Don't ignore that call within you. When you are called to be a tribal leader, when you are called to do something, of course, we all just answer the call right away. Yes, Lord, of course, I'm doing it. Well, Gideon was just a little bit more circumspect. Gideon questioned his calling and he wanted signs. In Judges 6:23 or 28 through 35, Gideon was instructed to pull down the altar of Baal and to cut down the sacred pole. Ashtoreth was depicted as a tree or a pole. The original artistic depictions of the Ashtoreth was a woman and with obvious sexual overtones. She was a woman who was usually depicted with a great deal of fertility, maybe with very large breasts, with an exaggerated pubic area. And over time, that artistic depiction sort of changed. And it changed so that the pubic area was a tree, and then it was just a tree, and that was Ashtoreth, and sometimes just a pole. So it is a feminine thing. The tree is a symbol of fertility. So Baal is usually depicted as a bull. So Baal is a bull, and Ashtoreth is a sacred tree or a sacred pole. Okay, and that's usually the temple set up in the middle of the community, and everybody's praying, everybody's going and praying at the sacred pole. So why don't we go pray at the sacred pole? But of course, to the Deuteronomic writer, that's just right out. You're going to have problems. Okay, so Gideon is instructed to pull down the altar of Baal and cut down the sacred pole. Ashtoreth is depicted as a sacred tree or pole. Gideon asks God for a sign by laying a fleece of wool on the threshing floor. And he says, if there is dew on the fleece in the morning, and if it's dry on the ground all around, then I shall know that you will deliver Israel by my hand. I will know that this calling is real and that I should act on it. The next morning, the fleece was wet, but the ground was dry. And then Gideon asks for a second sign. I'm sorry, that sign wasn't obvious enough. I need another sign. So Gideon asks for a second sign that the fleece would be dry, but the ground would be wet. And the next morning, the fleece was dry and the ground was wet. So what happens here is that Gideon raises an army to fight the Midianites. But God tells him he's got too many. Sorry, you got too many people. We've raised this army. I don't know how many. I think it does say in Judges 7 how many they eventually raised. But God takes a look and says, you got too many people here. You got too many people. God wants people to know it was God that wins the battle and not their own power. If we do it this way, there's a chance that y'all might start getting a big head and think that you did it yourself. But if we really narrow this down so that you go in with an absolutely minimal force with no chance of success on your own, then when we succeed, you're going to know that it was because God did it. Gideon tells the army that if anyone is afraid, they should go home. And 22,000 returned and 10,000 remained. So we're down to a third. And remember, don't trust any numbers in the Bible. Don't trust any numbers. But you get the general idea that Gideon sends home 2/3. So God tells Gideon, you still got too many. You still got too many. And Gideon takes the army down to the water, down to a stream, down to a river. And anyone who laps like a dog, they kept. But if they knelt down and drank with their hands, they were sent home. Now, I always thought that it really should be reversed. If the soldiers were kneeling down by the river, very cautious, maybe they got one hand on their sword, and with the other hand they're like that, and they're keeping their hands up. Maybe the ones who just flopped down and started drinking like a dog, maybe they're the ones that didn't have any concerns, and so I always thought that those two numbers should be reversed. But regardless. And another selection process was held, and again, more soldiers were sent home. So only 300 soldiers remained. It's like the Battle of the 300. So Gideon develops a surprise attack plan that creates the fog of war. People who have been in battle, which I am not one of, but people who have been in battle have described to me this situation called the fog of war. Bombs are exploding, everything is chaotic. You don't know, you can't find a commander, nobody's barking orders at you, and things are just plain confused. And it is called this fog of war. So Gideon develops a surprise attack plan that creates this fog of war. The Midianites become so confused that they end up fighting each other. Now, I didn't go in too much to the story of that surprise attack and how you create the fog of war, primarily because it depicts some pretty bad animal cruelty. Gideon takes foxes and ties torches to the ends of the fox's tail and then sends the foxes in through the camp, and the men have, that's the worst part. But men have jugs and they're concealing their torches, and at the very last minute they break the torches and everything is light, and he creates this fog of war, and the Canaanites don't know what's happening. They're asleep in their beds. They are woken up and, grab their sword and run out. They haven't gotten a chance to dress or anything like that. And no uniforms, you can't tell who's who, and they start fighting one another. So one of Gideon's sons, Abimelech, after this great battle, and of course Gideon and the Israelites defeat the Midianites, and so after this great battle, one of Gideon's sons, Abimelech, attempts to establish a monarchy, and he succeeds for about 3 years, but don't call it a legitimate monarchy. There is still no king or central authority in in Israel. There is we are still this loose confederation of tribes. Abimelech does not succeed in pulling all of the tribes together into a central government, into a central authority. We are still this loose confederation of tribes, and there is no king in Israel. No king in Israel. So, moving on to Samson. Samson is another one of our judges. He's a rather famous one. I absolutely love the old movie with Victor Mature and Deborah Carr, I believe, about Samson and Delilah. And if you read the entire Samson story, Delilah is she's one of those characters, but she's not the only mistake that Samson makes. Samson is a flawed character. He is a tragic hero archetype. He makes unwise decisions, especially in the area of romance, and he lets his anger get out of control. He is very much in the tradition of a tragic hero or a flawed hero, a flawed character archetype. He's a hero, and yet he has obvious human failings. And especially these unwise decisions in the area of romance. And from a metaphysical point of view, I tell you what, if there's one thing that will get us off of our purpose faster, it is finances and romances. Romances and finances. If there is something capable of taking us off of our divine purpose, if there is something that is capable of taking us away from the highest and best truth that we know. It is romances. I'm not against romance. I love my wife. We've been married 22 years, 23 years. And, there's nothing wrong with romance. And yet, when you are when you allow, I'm going to get indiscreet here, when you allow the little head to do the thinking for the big head, you're running into trouble. When you are letting when you are letting your life force, shall we say, when you are letting that rule your consciousness, all it creates is drama. All it creates is drama. And it is, so I just be aware. There's nothing wrong with a good, healthy sexual appetite, but when you're letting that do the thinking for you, you're running into challenges. You're running into problems. Same thing with money, finances and romances. The two things that'll get you off course faster than anything else: finances and romances. So, the birth of Samson is in a category of wonder births. Special or important characters, we've talked about this before. Special, think of Isaac, the child of promise. Special or important characters are born under unusual circumstances. Think Isaac, think Jacob, think Joseph and Moses, and we will eventually get to Samuel. The story of Samuel is coming up, and even Jesus. Special or important characters are born under unusual circumstances. Together, you can collect them into a system called the wonder births. And it is one of those things, while you've had Isaac, whose his father Abraham was 100 and his mother Sarah was 90 and past the age of women, as is mentioned in the Bible, and they give birth to Isaac, the child of promise, and it's a wonder. And you can say similar things for Isaac, for Jacob, for Joseph, for Moses, and eventually Samuel and Jesus. So the Israelites again did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord gave them into the hands of the Philistines for 40 years. Okay, again, we went out, we worshiped the Baals, we did what we were not supposed to do, and we're having trouble with the Philistines yet. God is using this neighboring tribe as a method of teaching us a lesson. And that becomes important. That general theme becomes important, again, throughout the arc of the historical narrative in Judaism, in the Bible. That becomes the arc of the historical narrative, that God is responsible for everything. And so if we're having trouble with this neighboring tribe, if we're having trouble with this empire that's on the horizon, if we're having trouble with Syria or Assyria or Babylon or one of these warring nations, if we're having that kind of trouble, it's because God intended it to happen. Why would God intend it to happen? Well, we've gone out and we've started worshiping the Baals again. That is the perspective of the writer. That is the perspective of the editor specifically. So Samson's mother was barren, but an angel appeared to her saying that she will conceive and bear a son. And she was to dedicate Samson as a Nazirite, or it means consecrated or separated. She's supposed to dedicate her son to God. This is a tradition that still goes on today. Sometimes the eldest male child is dedicated to be a priest, or the oldest girl child is dedicated to be a nun. This still happens in families today. He was to a Nazarite, as this is all described in Numbers chapter 6. A Nazarite is supposed to abstain from alcohol. They're supposed to let their hair grow and avoid defilement by contact with corpses. So you're not supposed to touch any dead bodies. So the birth of Samson is of the category wonder births, and Samson is this tragic or flawed hero or archetype. Let's move on. So what happens first? Samson marries a Philistine woman. This is not Delilah. This is Samson's first wife. So Samson falls in love with a Philistine woman. Oh my goodness. You know, I don't see this nearly as much as I used to, but if you talk to someone from a small town in Nebraska, sometimes the town was so small they only had one church. It was a Catholic church, and it was a Catholic community. And sometimes the town was so small they only had one church, and it was a Lutheran church, and it was a Lutheran community. Occasionally you had a town that was big enough to have both a Catholic church and a Lutheran church, and occasionally there might be a third church in there. There might be a Methodist church in there. If the town was big enough, you even had a Church of Christ, Church of God somewhere down the street a little bit. And what happened was that as kids started going to school together in public school, occasionally you would get a Lutheran boy and a Catholic girl, and they would, pitch some woo, and this was a big deal in these little tiny communities. It sounds absurd to us today, but this still goes on. These cultural conflicts still go on to this day. As Samson falls in love with the Philistine woman named Tinmah, and his parents object, but they say okay, and they arrange the marriage. And his father and mother did not know that this marriage was actually being arranged by God. And again, if it happened, then God is responsible for it. God makes everything happen. That is the worldview of the D writer. So his parents arranged the marriage. As Samson was traveling to see Tinmah, a lion attacks him. And the Spirit of the Lord, I want you to catch this phrase, the Spirit of the Lord rushed on him, and he tore the lion apart with his bare hands. Later, Samson was passing by the same place, and he sees that bees have made a hive in the carcass of the lion. At the wedding feast, so they're getting married, and at the wedding feast, Samson poses a riddle to the guests and beats them because no one can guess the answer. And this is the riddle. Out of the eater came something to eat. Out of the strong came something sweet. And I would love to hear this in the original Hebrew, because somebody at some time figured out how to make the Hebrew words. This has to have been a rhyme, the way it is in English, but how does this sound in Hebrew? Does it rhyme in Hebrew as well? Who knows? I'm going to guess a Hebrew scholar would know. The Philistines take Tinmah to trick. The Philistines get Tinmah to trick Samson to tell her the answer, and they guess that, and Samson knows that Tinmah had conspired with him. So Samson is aware that Tinmah has betrayed him. It's something small. This is just a riddle at a wedding feast. But now Samson knows that Timnah cannot be trusted. And the Spirit of the Lord, again, Samson just gets, he gets pumped up. The Spirit of the Lord rushed on him, and he went down to Ascalon, and he killed 30 men of the town. Seems like he overreacted a little bit, but, again, this is all, he's called, and he's got he's got anger issues. But God uses these anger issues to deal with the challenge of this cultural conflict with the Philistines. The Philistines, by the way, get a bad rep. They really get a bad rep. They are a remarkably civilized people. We've talked a little bit about the Philistines before. They are the sea people. They came out of the Mediterranean and inhabited coastal regions all along the Mideast. And they had a very nice, lovely artwork. Let's see here. So we're just about wrapping up. So that was Samson and his first wife, Timnah. You know what? The thing of the foxes, I attributed the story of the foxes there to Gideon. I think the fox's story is actually Samson. When Samson wanted to visit his wife, Timnah, now, why he's still hanging out with Timnah, I don't know. It's one of those things, finances and romances. When Samson wanted to visit his wife, Timnah, he discovers that his father-in-law had given her to someone else. So Samson catches 30 foxes, he ties torches to their tails and lets them go into the fields of the Philistines. Some tribe of Judah thinks, some of the tribe of Judah, some of his local people, some of his compatriots, some of the other Israelites think that he has gone too far. I'm sorry, this bit with the foxes, that's beyond the pale, Samson. You've gone too far. So they bind him with a new rope and they give Samson over to the Philistines. He has now been betrayed by his own people. So he's tied with a rope and he's given over to the Philistines. Samson breaks the rope and he kills 300 Philistines with the jawbone of a donkey, the jawbone of an ass. Let's see. I've just occasionally I've wanted to break the jawbone of an ass, but this was the jawbone with an ass. So Samson and Delilah. Samson, we're not yet to Delilah. We still have one other woman that we're going to deal with. Samson goes to a prostitute. This is not Delilah. Samson goes to a prostitute. This, again, might be one of those temple prostitutes that we talked about. That there was a temple prostitute. The way that we have fertility in the land is to encourage the gods up in heaven, encourage Baal and Ashtoreth to copulate up in heaven. And how do we encourage them to copulate in heaven? We have sex right here in the temple, and I don't make that stuff up. This is actually what happens. So Samson goes to a prostitute. She might be one of these temple prostitutes. We don't know. She goes to a prostitute in Gaza. This is the Gaza Strip that occasionally you'll hear about on the news today. The Gazite men are trying to ambush him as he sleeps, but Samson wakes up early and foils the plan. When the prostitutes are mentioned, he might be referring to temple prostitution. We covered that. Samson falls in love with a Philistine woman named Delilah. And here we go. Here is Delilah. The Philistine men get her to coax Samson into revealing the secret of his strength. Why is Samson so strong? So they can capture him. Samson misleads her 3 times. Samson knows that Delilah is is conspiring with the Philistine men and trying to undermine Samson. So Samson misleads her 3 times. Each time the plot to capture Samson fails. And finally, after she has nagged him, this is straight out of verse 16. 16, finally, 16:16. Finally, after she had nagged him with her words day after day and pestered him, he was tired to death. So he told her his whole secret and said to her, "A razor has never come upon my head, for I have been a Nazirite from God to God from my mother's womb. If my head were shaved, then my strength would leave me, and I would become weak like anyone else." So Samson finally reveals the big secret to Delilah, and he's got to know what's going to happen. Finances and romances. So the destruction of the temple, the plot to Samson succeeds because in verse 16:20, the Lord had left him. Because he cut his hair, the Lord had left him. His strength, his power had gone. Does God ever leave us? Would God leave us because we cut our hair? No, but we could believe it to be true. We could believe that if we cut our hair, the power of God would leave us. And if we believe it, so it is true for us. So the Philistines seized him and gouged out his eyes. Hasn't he been kind of blind right from the beginning? So this can be a metaphorical, he just simply does not see what is obvious to him. They brought him down to Gaza, and they bound him with bronze shackles, and he ground at the mill in prison. And if you've ever seen one of these things, usually they have an animal of some kind, a donkey or something like that, and they get the donkey to walk around in a circle around a millstone. You push the pole and the millstone rolls and the grain is ground. Let me see. So that's what they have him doing. It's a very insulting job. It's a job for donkeys, and we're giving it to Samson. So they brought it. So he's at the mill in prison, but the hair of his head begins to grow again after it had been shaved. So as his hair grows, his strength returns. The Philistines throw a big party to offer sacrifice to their god, Dagon. Dagon. It's another fertility god. And Dagon is depicted here right in the center there. He's depicted as half man, half fish, because the Philistines are sea people. They come out of the sea. They are beginning to settle, just like the Israelites are coming from being herdsmen and nomadic people and trying to settle inland. The Philistines are coming in from the Mediterranean, and they are trying to take land and seize and settle. So, and they are throwing a big god to their god Dagon, a big party to their god Dagon. They make Samson stand between the pillars of the temple, and Samson called out to the Lord, and his strength returns, and he pushes the pillars apart, and the roof collapses. And that is the story of Samson. But there is still no king in Israel. And you know what? We're going to break with that. Let's go ahead and receive our offering blessing together. I'm going to push this down here and take your offering or anything that is representative of your abundance and your prosperity. I'm using this little token because I give my gift online. Let's left hand the God hand, right hand the multiplying hand. Let us affirm this offertory blessing together. Divine love flowing through me blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. I am joy-filled and grateful. Thank you, God. And you can send your gifts, your tithes, and love offerings to paypal.me/UnityLincoln. That's paypal.me/UnityLincoln. Or you can go, if you're already on PayPal, you can send it directly to office@unitylincoln.org. You can also send your gift either through the mail, the old-fashioned way, or using a bank transfer, which helps us offset some of our banking fees. You can send it to Unity Lincoln, P.O. Box 30209, Lincoln, Nebraska 68503. Or you can go to our webpage at unitylincoln.org, and there you will find a convenient link to donate via PayPal. You can also support Unity Lincoln by signing up for the Amazon Smile program so that every purchase that you make on Amazon.com supports Unity Lincoln. Please remember to like us on Facebook, subscribe on YouTube, give us that big thumbs up, feed the algorithm. We very much appreciate it when you do. Adeline's Wednesday night book club is on a little bit of a break, a little bit of a hiatus. They will return in September. I don't have the final date of reawakening, but they will be returning with the book Man's Quest for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And that is a great book to study in a book club. There's a lot to unpack with that book. So join Adeline and her friends for the book club. Remember to join us together for the Sunday morning worship service. Our sanctuary is open. We are still receiving people. As a matter of fact, today is potluck. But we are also still live streaming on YouTube and Facebook, and you can follow us from the convenience of your own home. And I am so grateful that you have been able to join us here for Metaphysics with Reverend Evan Coleman. I'm so grateful that you have been here with us. God bless you all. Bye-bye.